Vintage Cube Draft is one of the most beloved ways to play Magic the Gathering. It is a format headlined by game-winning combos, the most efficient spells ever printed, and even the Power 9. The most common way to engage with the format is via Magic Online, and the cube list on MTGO is the baseline for almost every Vintage Cube. Over time, the Magic Online Vintage Cube has been updated with new cards that have claimed their place in the format. And today marks the biggest update in the cube's history, with over 108 cards being changed. Many cards that are viewed as iconic to the cube are being replaced. And in today's video, I'm going to be going through the official update posted by the cube's curator, Ryan Spain, where he explains why the changes are being made. Oops, I did it again. Another major Vintage Cube update. Greetings, Vintage Cube enthusiasts. The last time we ran the Magic Online Vintage Cube, we made around 80 swaps, a huge amount of change relative to the usual level. Overall, the changes were well received and successful, but the changes included many cards that we were trying out that wouldn't all stick, many cards we removed but wanted to bring back in, and many cards that should exit the Vintage Cube that we left alone for the season. Then, The Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth launched and delivered many more Vintage Cube staples than the average set. The result? We made 80 swaps seem tame this time. The latest iteration of the Vintage Cube has a whopping 108 changes. That's a lot, even if you don't count the cards we cut last time that are returning. Why another big change? The first big change had a lot of lessons, one of which I spoke on the Limited Resources podcast. The Magic Online Vintage Cube is not a card museum, it is a premium play experience. Now, I listened to that podcast when it came out, and Ryan Spain, for those who don't know, is the original co-host of Limited Resources. So he has been a part of the community in Limited for a very long time, and he cares deeply about providing the best play experience possible. Now, one of the things he talked about on that podcast in great depth was that there are cards that are in the Vintage Cube, not because they are the most powerful cards in Magic's history, but because they've been in the Vintage Cube for so long that people come to expect to find them there. However, Vintage Cube is a play experience, not a chance to look at the pretty cards as you're taking your boosters. And so one of his philosophies is that he's going to be making these changes where he gets rid of old cards that don't really see much play, the cards that people are never excited to put in their deck, the cards that are more like last picks or marginal playables or sideboard cards, and he's going to replace them with cards that are very, very powerful, because the whole point of Vintage Cube is it is the draft format where all of the best cards are available, barring a very few couple of cards that are powerful but have unfun play patterns. And it's actually a really nice change to make, because one of the things in Vintage Cube is that the delta between the best cards and the worst cards can still be very high, even though it's the best of the best. A Black Lotus is still a Black Lotus, which is a ridiculous card. An Ancestral Recall is still an Ancestral Recall. But if you start to gradually raise the floor by improving the quality of the bad cards in the cube, you end up in a spot where everyone has a fighting chance, even if they don't open a piece of power, and everyone gets to do ridiculous things, which is one of the reasons people play Vintage Cube in the first place. So it's one of Ryan Spain's philosophies. Another philosophy he had is that he's willing to make the big changes and then hear what the community has to say about them. He's willing to remove these iconic cards and then hear people clamor to bring them back, or say, wow, the card you replaced it with is amazing. I'm really happy you made these changes. But the only reason he's going to be able to learn these things is because he's willing to make the big changes in the first place that are going to then lead to the community feedback. And he's been very active talking to the community and getting feedback, as he covers a little bit later in this article. So, while nostalgia will always be a factor in cube decisions, the Magic Online Vintage Cube has been historically ruled by nostalgia to the point that it was detrimental to the goal of offering the most powerful but still fun strategies available. One beauty of Vintage Cube is it can suffer a lot of chaff and still be a ton of fun. That's one of the reasons the chaff buildup has become so pronounced. It was easy to let the cards losing their edge keep their slots because the experience was still fun. Plus, nostalgia. So these are some of the cards that he's removing. Ravages of War, Palancron, Bloodghast, Avalanche Riders, Eureka. Eureka, famously a card that people love to have in the cube, even though everyone knows it's bad. So getting rid of that card for a card that you can actually play in your deck is just like a massive upside. Rishadan Port, again, it's not a card museum. This card is playable in like legacy decks, but in modern era limited, you can't really pay 2 mana to tap one of your opponent's lands, and even it's just not that powerful. Some of these cards can find homes, like Palancron can be a home in certain infinite combo decks, but it's kind of a niche thing to be able to do, and there are other infinite combos available for the people that want to be doing that. Avalanche Riders is just a hilarious card because that card just looks bad and isn't that good when it gets played in any situation. Farewell, old friends, as he says. But yes, in the next couple paragraphs, he talks about how he got feedback from the community. So he talked to the person who won the most Vintage Cube trophies the last time the season was around. So for the last Vintage Cube iteration, who was just playing the format a lot, talking to other Vintage Cube players, and really has a pulse on the format. And so he just got feedback on the cards that maybe weren't good from talking to that person. And so that's kind of what those paragraphs are about. These are some new cards that are being added. So just really powerful 5-drop flyer, subtlety for some like interaction. Tenacious Underdog is a new 2-drop. Raptor is a nice aggressive card. Mox Opal is very good for artifact decks. Mana Confluence, just good for fixing. Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy, another card that just like kind of good in certain strategies, opens up some infinite combos, which you remove a little bit of infinite combo, add some infinite combo. Isika's Chariot, just good. So he's just adding a lot of very powerful cards to the cube that definitely deserve a place, and they're replacing cards that just haven't been seeing play. And so it's just like, even though these iconic cards or cards that are viewed as iconic, like Eureka has been viewed as an iconic card in the cube. Something like Winter Orb is sometimes viewed as iconic to the cube. Ravages of War sometimes. But these cards that he's adding are just really, really nice, powerful cards. I will let the individual change notes speak for themselves, but I've never been more excited for a Magic Online Vintage Cube season. And honestly, I'm very excited for this Magic Online Vintage Cube season. I don't historically play tons of the cube because one of the problems I've had is that it feels like sometimes your opponent does something absolutely ridiculous and you have no possible response. But if my deck can always have a shot at doing something absolutely ridiculous thanks to more good cards being in the cube, then that's like a plus for me, and I'm excited to see the changes. And also, I have to say that his response to community feedback definitely makes me excited to play more, because I know that if I'm having some struggles with a card or not enjoying a play experience with a certain card, and other players are having that same experience, that he's very likely to be able to make a change. Whereas in the past, it's like, these are the cards in Vintage Cube. They don't change for like years and years and years. Very small changes are made, then they're reverted and stuff like that. So I'm actually really excited for this Vintage Cube season as well. We had to say goodbye to a lot of comfortable old friends to get here, but I think the result will be the best Vintage Cube we've ever run. If you already missed some of your old friends, don't worry, many will be back to say hello in future iterations of the cube. They just won't be the mainstays they have been to date. So if you are worried about your favorite card getting taken out of the cube, one thing he also mentioned on that episode of Limited Resources is that he views the Vintage Cube as the sort of thing where you can bring in certain packages of cards for one iteration of the cube, but you don't have to have them be in the cube every single time. Like, obviously, you're always going to have the Power 9, you're always going to have the absolute pinnacle of the cards and the best of the best. But being able to rotate in small packages of cards, like a bit of a sacrifice theme sometimes, or a bit of a taxing theme where you play a bit of prison in some iterations of the cube, that's something that can definitely be done, because there are so many powerful cards to choose from that it almost makes more sense to bring in certain versions to spice it up. It's almost like back when they had the Shadows Remastered format on MTG Arena, where there was one slot in the booster pack that was rotating every week. So like 1 week it was flashback cards, 1 week it was tribal cards. And that's the sort of thing that you can definitely do on Vintage Cube, because Vintage Cube comes out a few times a year. And so every time you can have a little bit of a different offering, and it makes it fun for everyone to go back to the cube and see how it's been shaken up a little bit. But yeah, many will be back. Are you excited, intrigued, upset? I'm definitely excited and intrigued, not really upset. Give the new cube a shot. Let us know what you think, and happy cubing. So I'm not going to be going through the individual changes because there's 108 individual changes, but I will post a link to this article in the comment section down below, or in the pinned comment, and also in the description. So you'll be able to find all of these changes. I did go through them individually, and I'm pretty happy with a lot of them. Just replacing a lot of cards that historically aren't very good and replacing them with new and exciting cards that I'm personally looking forward to playing with. There are a couple of cards leaving that I did enjoy, but as he said, they oftentimes weren't always the most powerful, and they can come back in the future if they do turn out to be on that power level. Anyway, that's going to be doing it for this video. If you did make it all the way till the end, leave hashtag #HappyCubing in the comment section down below, and let me know whether you'd like to see videos like this in the future, as well as draft videos for the Vintage Cube on the channel. I'm happy to make some gameplay videos. That's going to do it for this one, though. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you next time.